Farlost, created by John Miro. 27. Newark couldn't stop chittering until Doug frosted the windows, using a little of the tram's precious remaining energy to light the crew cabin at the same time as he blocked out the ship's sickening hurtle. He walked a few paces, now only slightly seasick from the rolling the artificial gravity couldn't overcome, instead of overwhelmed with nausea, as he had been looking out the window. He looked over to where the two tumblers were locked down. Posk had woven most of his tentacles through Newark's exoskeleton and sunk them inside the gray ball of string silk, shivering at his center. Only the tip of Newark's beak stuck out through the spider-like silk that hid the majority of the tumbler's body, as deep inside the exoskeleton as he could withdraw to. As Posk wrapped tentacles more tightly around his friend, Newark finally stopped the chittering that was his species' equivalent of screaming in terror. "Finally he shuts up," Wish's voice squeaked out of the earpiece adhering to Doug's head near his right ear hole. Doug rubbed his mandibles in anger at Wish's lack of sympathy, but kept silent about it. Wish was scared too. They all were. Daisy's voice came over the comm link with a touch more static than before. "Salix?" The tree clacked his elbows together, making a loud crack, like tree branches smashing together. "As you can hear, he's fine," Doug said, the only member of the crew moving about the cabin. "We're looking for his voice box. It came loose when the shockwave hit." Doug thanked the briny Skanen seas that the Betty had warned them about the shockwave. In those precious seconds, the captain's shouts had spurred everyone to fast action, dropping whatever salvage they had been collecting from the old hulk and hauling ass back inside the tram's crew cabin. Daisy's override of the tram system to reinforce the paltry gravity in the old tram had been enough to save the ship from tearing apart in the massive shockwave, Doug was sure, not to mention preventing the living occupants from being turned into stains on the walls. The first officer's duty, and his Skanen exoskeleton and pincer grips, made Doug the one to haul Salix and then both the tumblers to their seats when no one else had the presence of mind or biological wherewithal to do it. Doug skittered in a circle, pushing his eye stalks fully out of his skull plating and staring in different directions until he found the small square black box wedged into the tracks at the bottom of the airlock. He carefully plucked the box free by one of the two short rubberized lengths on either side and tossed it over to the tree. Salix deftly caught it and sketched a quick "thank you" sign to Doug before strapping the box into position around the thicket of branches that would be a neck on a human shape. The tree used fine finger-like vines on the end of what approximated human hands to power up the device. "I'm fine, Daisy." The synthesized human voice Salix chose to represent itself emanated from the box, "for the time being." With that typical understatement, the Scarecrow leaned back against his acceleration couch, unflappable as ever. For a being hurtling away from the safety, heat, and shelter of his ship, and toward a cold, airless death in space, Doug finished silently, sure, he was as good as could be. "We are glad," Daisy said, then inquired about Doug and the tumblers. After quick status updates on the crew of the tram, Doug turned the conversation around. "How's the ship, Daisy? The captain? Grouper?" "Betty has sustained critical damage and lost power. Many of my neural nodes and relays have been degraded, and a full status report is not possible at this time." "The shockwave," Salix's machine voice asked. "Will it blow us clear?" Pops and whistles on the line betrayed Wish's fear. "You will," the Manta said. "The debris field's banging us around and killing our momentum. You're moving out faster. The arrival object saved the tram and the ship from the worst of the debris, but now our extra mass is slowing us faster. Above and beyond more things hitting us." "Captain Sam! Captain Sam!" Newark wailed. Posk nuzzled even tighter and quieted him. Wish was telling them that unless things changed, the crew on the tram had a fighting chance at a miserable life. The crew of the Betty did not. Doug sighed. "So we break free with just a few hours of breathable air, battery power, and chem thrusters. Look on the bright side, that arrival will bring the guard. If all else fails, they'll probably offer you an indentureship. We Wish stopped himself before saying something, Doug guessed, like, "We won't even last that long." Doug didn't want to think about the guard and what their rescue might bring. He almost hoped he'd freeze to death first. Almost. He pulled up a scan of the Betty, hoping to see something that might help. All he saw reinforced what Daisy and Wish had said. Their ship had been hit by far more debris and had indeed been slowed down a lot more than the tram. He felt his antenna wriggle. He kept looking for a faint hope. He couldn't just let the Betty and his friends aboard her go. Doug paused, staring at a motion capture of the marvelous black sphere. The object of his demise, he guessed. Unless the captain and the Betty's engineer could pull off one of their trademark Hail Mary saves. He shut down the display but left the audio feed to his earpiece live. There was nothing else for him to do now. "Good luck, Betty," Doug said in as quiet a voice as his immense chitinous thorax could make. "You too," Wish said. More pops and whistles betrayed his emotions before the line went quiet. Doug crossed over to fold his legs back and sit in the narrow space between Newark and Salix's crash couches. He reached one mid-leg out to each of them and clamped his digits closed around a support strut. The tumblers could survive in hibernation for a few days, even at temperatures far below zero. Salix would lose mobility, and his vines would wither after a few days, but he could grow them back to slave away for the guard if they were rescued. As for himself, well, Skanen could slow their metabolism, live in vacuum for extended periods of time. If the temperature plummeted far enough, he'd eventually succumb too, of course. Life serving the guard, or a miserable end, freezing to death. Doug really didn't know which to choose. Salik clacked what amounted to his ankle against Doug's mid-leg. He signed something. It took him 2 attempts before Doug got enough to understand him. "We freeze or we slave?" Doug shook his head. "Hail Mary." Salix cocked his head. Doug waited for him to crack 2 thick branches together in laughter, but he didn't. He nodded. "Hail Mary," he signed back to Doug, then leaned back and let leaves cover his eyes. Doug stared at the softly glowing windows and considered the spinning nightmare beyond them. The captain had pulled off amazing feats with the help of his mysterious Mary before. Doug hoped and prayed she would answer his hailing call one more time. Farlost. Music by Kevin MacLeod of Incompetech.com. Learn more at servingworlds.com. Hi, this is John Miro. If you're enjoying Farlost, please consider visiting patreon.com, patreon.com/servingworlds, and lend your support. Be a patron of my fiction. Thank you.